So I've been trying to note down questions which have flown by, and some people have been answering them in the chat and things like that. But I'm trying to think about, I'm trying to do them not necessarily in the order they came, because some of them are quite technical things. And but there were a couple of people asking about the business of converting existing notes, existing LaTeX notes, or trying to get colleagues who, Christian mentioned, Chiron is a command line thing you install in Python, and I'm perfectly happy with that, but colleagues not necessarily, and things like that. So, I mean, perhaps any of you three who would like to answer it, could you talk about the process of doing this as a conversion from an existing set of notes as a sort of thing for your department to do with people who are not so technical? Christian, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so we've, I think pretty much the whole department uses Chiron now. And really, we've got the process down to where the lecturers don't really need to do anything. So it is at the base step, there is a command line tool, but we don't expect the lecturers to interact with that. They use it through Canvas. And ideally, they just produce some LaTeX source and upload it through Canvas, and then it's there. So that's the aim for us, and that's the reason we've made the tool that way, because we know that there are people who will fiddle about with tools, but for everybody else, we need to just make something that they don't think about.
And there was some talk in the chat about LaTeX, whether it eats all your LaTeX or whether you need to simplify your LaTeX. Could you just talk about that briefly?
Yeah, the aim is to take all LaTeX, but the packages vary in support. It effectively re-implements LaTeX and can interpret some packages but not others. So quite often we do say to lecturers to simplify stuff. And in fact, people do a lot of LaTeX packages exist in order to get particular effects on a PDF or on a printed page, which don't make sense on the web. So it makes sense to stop using them anyway. But yeah, there are some things that would be nice to have that you have to say, maybe not.
David.
Yeah, so I'd reiterate that, as Christian said, that I think that Chiron definitely offers the best option there in terms of if you've got existing tech notes and you want as seamless as process as possible. The R Markdown, obviously, there's lots of people already using R and R Markdown for other purposes, particularly in the stats area. And so people are already, the R Markdown is certainly a route for those who already have interest in R Markdown, already using R Studio. Or I see I'm not sure whether the future, it depends whether if the whole tech world gets stacked together and makes PDFs that are nicely accessible, then we might have a different conversation. But in a few years' time, the question will be whether or not students are necessarily learning the same LaTeX we were learning 30 years ago for generating the documents, or whether they're actually they might be using more Jupyter notebooks and R Markdown and Markdown-based things. There are converters. I mean, Chiron does a really good job. There are just like Pandoc. You can give it a text file and it will spew out a file that's quite close to being good for various Markdown formats or the Python notebook format. But you've got to play around with a few things. They're very good at itemize and standard things like enumerates and stuff.
I'll put Christian's qualification onto the recording. He said in the chat that when he said the whole department uses Chiron, he means except for a few statisticians who are very happy with R Markdown and Quarter. So the other question that I think I put in my list rather than saying in the chat is one thing that I was very interested in was alt text, because coming from a LaTeX point of view, LaTeX doesn't naturally ask you about alt text. Markdown does. There is a process for putting that in there. I'm sort of aware that some of these systems, there was a question about TIX diagrams and whether the systems will accept a diagram written in TIX. But if you're doing something like that, how do people get alt text into these files?
I'll jump back in briefly. So in our Markdown, there's lots of different ways of including images and things like that. And the R Markdown has ever increasing ways of doing it in terms of being able to, as I mentioned, kind of specifically distinguishing between captions and alt text, which isn't always available in the Markdown. In Markdown, you just kind of normally give one set of words that's used for both. As you saw in the Jupyter notebooks, you can also type, if you're planning to just generate an HTML, you can type HTML code, and then you've got full reign to use alt text and the long descriptions as well that we talked about earlier. in terms of so in terms of the other accessibility, like all of these accessibility things are being added, as you saw earlier, like some of the things that Volker kind of talked about, if they're being done by others to make HTML accessible, then certainly the Jupyter and the Markdown and the R Markdown stuff will just plug in and use them, just with the right syntax.
Thank you. Christian, can you talk about LaTeX and alt text?
I can try. It's something I haven't got around to yet very much. What we've done is we've added in a /alt text macro, which you can use within a figure environment, which Chiron uses to add in alt text to the image that's inside that. And then you would probably also have a caption underneath as well for the thing. But yeah, I've done a lot of work in numbers on very accessible diagrams and the kind of interaction Volker was showing. And I want to either reuse that or reuse Volker's stuff in Chiron for better accessibility.
Yeah, when I was listening to Volker's talk, I was thinking, like, this sounds lovely but complicated, and what I really need is for a second tier tool to make that happen for, make me do that in a way that I can understand with what I'm already doing. He had a slide later on that was about, people not changing what they're actually doing, but using it better, sort of thing. Volker,
can I say something?
Of course.
Rather than typing, my wrists sore. First of all, never change the authors. Always change the tools. That's absolutely. Continue to use your LaTeX. So the nice thing about pretext is it gives you a fairly simple XML. You can also kind of use some sort of markdown for it. And it retains the nice thing about LaTeX, which is the maths typesetting, right? Nobody wants to change that. Everything else in LaTeX, think about mini pages. Oh my God, you don't want those in, in a reflowable environment. So, I mean, there's a lot of these tools out there, and I find this is a very interesting and very good ecosystem. And things develop in various sites and in all kinds of directions. As I said, the nice thing about pretext, they're currently putting together a kind of a proper editor for it as well, which will help. And the graphics that is normally Tixi, and now we're starting to build on top of this smallish language, which should also help visually impaired authors writing graphics, not just reading it, but also generating it, which is often something that is people don't pay attention to. Right? You don't want people to actually have to write an XML language, something serious, very difficult in order to generate graphics. So, of course, it's the best solution. No, I'm sure. But check it out. Pretext is really nice. I mean, then there's tons of open source textbooks out there in pretext, and a lot of authors are using it in the States already.
Thank you. Just one little thing at the end there. The comments just appeared in the chat about students not always liking HTML because they can't make their own notes on top of it. It was very important to me that there's the system would still produce the PDF that somebody can print out if they want to, while it's producing the online version if that's what people need, or that I can print out for handouts and things like that. But of course, you can sometimes write on top of HTML files. And Lillian asked whether we should give students the tool that creates the notes so that they can add their own annotations to it and things like that. I wonder, I mean, Alex, perhaps I could pick on you. Would you give them the Jupyter file, or would you, how would you deal with that issue?
Yeah, so when I was teaching this course last year, a bunch of students did want printed copies of the notes, and that was fine because I didn't cover it, but much like R Markdown, you can click a button and it produces a PDF instead, so that was fine. Yeah, I mean, historically, I would have left gaps in my notes. So where I've now got those drop-down things, I used to just leave a gap in the notes and ask students to write it in there. And I didn't quite figure out a good way to sort of have both. Probably just making sure I just give up and put a bit of a gap in. In terms of providing students with it, I think it would be fine to provide them with the notebooks. It probably wouldn't work so well with the full Jupyter book package, just because it becomes quite a big directory of all the files that needs to create the nice looking web pages. But yeah, certainly don't see an issue with the raw notebooks being provided. And then you can leave, you know, big code cells or something in there for them to write their own notes in, or even try and program something up.
Cool, thank you. I'm now slightly over my time, so I'm going to invite Jenny to come back in. I've tried to ask the questions that I felt were more the sort of things that I could understand, but there was a lot of technical chat in the chat, which I'm hoping people are getting a lot out of. And Jenny, I think you said you're going to sort of try and represent anything that we've missed, if you can, along the way.
Yeah, I think that was well worth carrying on with those questions, and well picked out for the questions which worked well for everybody. There is technical chat going on in the chat. Please keep at that. It's brilliant. And if there's things which don't get answered, then we will try and pick them up. We will go and have a little bit of a look back through them. So we've got just a little bit of time at the end just to talk a little bit about next steps and any general questions people wanted to say. So in terms of that, what I'd like to say is, first of all, huge thank you to all of these people that we've had together today, because having so many experts on such a interesting and complicated area has been absolutely brilliant. There's just so many things today that have made me think, oh, these are things we could try. How about this? That might work somewhere else. And if we go back to what the students said at the beginning, they said that we should be asking students, we should be adapting, and we should be trying things. I think there's going to be an awful lot of that happening after today, where people are taking away something they've seen and trying it. What I would love is to have that then turn into coming back and telling us what's happened and what's worked. So there are 2 links that I've been putting up on all of the slides in between the sessions for TALMO to sign up to that. So I think people will have come from one of 2 options today, either come through TALMO or come through the JISC route. Please do sign up to TALMO, it's brilliant. I've been sending it to all of the digital learning people that I work with, telling them that it's not just for mathematicians, it's full of fantastic things. But also the JISC group. So the JISC Accessible Maths group is a special interest group where we've been getting together to talk about what different universities are doing and share things. There's a mailing list and there's meetings every month or 2. So if you wanted to sign up to that and come back and tell us what you've tried out today, what's worked, or ask further questions to this brilliant community, please do that. We can shape it to be what you need it to be, and we can have a look at, as Lillian suggests, students showing us more about things of how they cope with things, asking the students to test things out for us, because both Lillian and myself have some students that work with us. I think at least one of mine is here today. I think Aspen's here, and they will try things out for us, tell us what they think. So that's just a plug for trying to keep some of this going and keep in touch. If you've got other general questions, now is a really good time to ask them in the chat or in the Q&A. So if you've got something that you thought from earlier on, or something about accessibility, about TALMO, about the JISC group, please do put them in there, and I will pick them up and we'll direct them to the right people. But keep using the chat for all of the bits of threads that are going on there for now as well. Yeah, from Ben about the baseline, that would be a fantastic project, and I'd love something like that that we can just share with staff to say, here is the kind of getting started, because it is a really complicated area to get started in. When I got asked to look at this about 3 years ago, when I started a new job, my first reaction to my then boss, she said, oh, you can have a look at this and you could put some notes together for us by the summer. And this was about sort of April. I said, well, I think it might take a bit longer than that. And 3 years later, we're still working on what might be the right guidance, because we were very keen not to tell people something which was then going to change. So I think it was Volker said earlier, don't throw away your LaTeX, keep hold of your source material, because things do change. And I've been very keen that we shouldn't be telling anybody to do something unless we knew that it was definitely producing something good, which I think a lot of the things today have been. So that's been absolutely brilliant.
That's great. I think we should thank everybody for speaking, and thanks to you, Jenny, for coordinating, because we've co-chaired this, but you've done an awful lot of bringing all these people together, and it's been a fantastic lineup. So well done. I don't know if the TALMO people want to say anything just in the last minute or two.
Shall I do that, Peter? Just as I don't know
Thank you.
quite whether anybody else is there. So really, just to echo what Peter's just said, and huge thank you to Jenny, because she really has done a huge amount of work in putting together what's been a really fabulous afternoon. I've learned an awful lot this afternoon. So thank you to all of the speakers, and particularly can I say thanks to the students that engaged and actually contributed to this session as well. I think that's a really worthwhile thing to do. So to everybody else, enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening that you've got left, and hopefully we'll see you back at the next TALMO event. Thank you very much, everybody.